Thanks for staying up later. I'm Bob Costas. Tonight, an opportunity I'm really looking forward to. We'll talk about some of the history of rock and roll with Graham Nash. And before we get into that, let's take a look at the video from the American Dream album, the first Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young album in 18 years. The musical harmonies of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young are much acclaimed, but it's no secret that there was a lot of personal disharmony from time to time.
Absolutely. You ever fight with your brothers?
I don't have any brothers. I used to fight with my sister.
Yeah, sibling rivalry on an intense level. But you've got four people who are very intense, very opinionated, very strong about the way that they want to do things, the way they want to hear their own particular music. It's just like a family.
Just like a family, or even more intense in that regard? I mean,
even
intense to the point where sometimes you have to say, I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, we did that for many years. We've started albums, almost completed them, and just walked away from it. We've always only wanted to make music when we loved each other dearly enough to be true to the muse of music. And sometimes it just wasn't there, and we knew it. But we had the strength to walk away from it and not be forced to make albums that we didn't want to make. That's one of the great things about Atlantic Records. They truly understood that, that this was a special bunch of people, that they should leave us alone and let us make the music, and they would take it when it came. In '69, when we first signed with them, we signed for 6 albums. We still haven't done 6. And Ahmet Ertegun and the people in Atlantic have been kind enough to keep the corporate lawyers away from us, because they had every right to force us to make records, but they wouldn't be able to do that, and they know it.
That must have been an interesting dynamic, especially in the late 60s and early 70s. Rock and roll guys, much more on the edge then than they appear to be now, coming out of Woodstock Nation, but having to deal with guys who I guess stereotypically were guys in shiny suits with pinky rings and big cigars just trying to turn out records.
That's true in almost every case other than Ahmet Ertegun. Ahmet is truly a music man. He's a writer and a producer, and he knows quality when he sees it. And he kept everybody away from us, and it's to his credit. That's why this new record is with Ahmet. You know, after all these years, after 18 years, we went back to Ahmet because we were loyal to him, because he was loyal to us.
On a new record like American Dream, 20 years after your greatest fame, how much of the chemistry naturally exists, and how much do you have to work to put back in place?
We don't have to work at chemistry with this band. It's like Crosby says, it's like juggling 4 bottles of nitroglycerin. You know, you drop one and it's all over, except that this year there were no tops on the bottles. And it was very interesting. First of all, we managed to get right back to where we left off, which was an amazing thing. And second of all, I think we'd grown up a little, we'd matured a little, we were much more compassionate with each other, much more understanding. You know, it didn't bother me that Stephen put an F chord into my C chord, you know, which happened, you know, several years ago, and we didn't speak to each other for a couple of years. Silly things like that. We were much better at it this time.
Were you always the most tolerant of the 4, the least confrontational? I think of an album like Deja Vu, where it's easy to distinguish which is the signature song of each.
Yes.
Deja Vu is Crosby's, and obviously, for obvious reasons, Sweet Judy Blue Eyes is Stills, and Neil Young's, at times, abrasive, confrontational style is Right There in Ohio. The anger jumps out at you.
Yep.
And then your song is Teach Your Children, which was one of the most conciliatory songs of a very volatile time.
Yeah. We're very, very different people. And the fact that we make music together astounds me even today. I don't know what the hell these 4 people are doing together. It doesn't make sense, but it does.
What role have you played in trying to get David Crosby back on the relatively straight and narrow?
It's a good question. I love David dearly. I find him to be a fascinating man. He's brilliant. He's very, very different than me. When he was at the depths of his, let's say, depression, I tried everything to get him off drugs. I tried doing more drugs than he did. I tried doing none at all. I tried everything. And it was only when Crosby himself turned himself into the FBI and made the decision to go for life instead of death, that I began to realize it was only David could do it. None of his friends could do it. The intervention that we did with 12 of his closest friends meant nothing.
All at one time, these
All at one
dozen
time.
came together?
Oh, yeah.
Who was there?
Well, myself and Jackson Brown, Grace Slick, Paul Kantner, Carl Gottlieb, who wrote David's autobiography with him, a bunch of other people, all sat him down one day. Oh, God, I'll never forget it. I'm sitting in David's living room, pretty much like this in Mill Valley. There's 12 of us. We know what's going to happen. He's coming off the road, and I can hear him walking up the path going, "Oh, boy, it's good to be home. Oh, boy." And he opens the door. "Oh, God." And there we were. And we said, "David, come and sit down. We all have something we want to say to you." But it didn't work. I mean, 12 of his closest friends, told him personally for, 10 minutes each how much he had hurt them and, what he meant to them personally. And his response was to go into the bathroom and freebase cocaine some more. And it was infuriating. Jackson Brown took him the next day on a private jet down to a treatment center in Southern California. He walked out after an hour. Couldn't handle it. They wanted to separate him and Jan, and that was the worst thing that could have happened for them, right? Because they only really had each other. And they left. But David made the decision in Florida to turn himself in, and he ended up doing a year in jail. And I'll never say that jail is good for anybody, but it certainly saved David's life. And so what role did I play? I played his friend. I loved him. I wanted him to be alive. I wanted him to keep creating music that meant so much not only to me, but to many other people. So I tried to be his friend.
When you look back now on the relatively short history overall of rock and roll, but it's the history of a lifetime in your case, do you regret the drug involvement? Not how much you might have personally been involved, but the fact that there was a period of time when rock and roll almost glorified drug use.
That's absolutely true. And did I regret it? I didn't. I don't regret anything I've ever done. Not at all. Because whatever it is that I've done, whatever I've been through, whatever experiences have happened to me, I am here right now talking to you. I'm still alive. I'm still creative. I still feel effective in my society. I still feel I can change the world. I have 3 great kids and a beautiful wife. My life is fantastic. So whatever I did brought me to this point. So I can never regret it.
When David Crosby finally emerged from prison, what was the post-prison reunion like?
Phenomenal. I was doing a solo tour and headed for Texas. I arrived at the airport in Houston and expected to be met by somebody from the place that I was playing, and there was Crosby. And I hardly recognized him at first. He put on a lot of weight. Of course, his hair was short. His mustache had been cut. But he was standing there smiling. And I played the show that night. There's a part in the show where I play Wind on the Water, which was a song I wrote for the Great Whales. And preceding it, there's an a cappella vocal piece that Crosby wrote called Critical Mass. And the two have always been linked. And no matter whether I've been playing a show with David or not, I always, put the 2 pieces of music together. Lights go out. These beautiful voices come on. People know that it's the beginning of Wind on the Water. The curtain opens, and the entire place falls down. Because they recognize Crosby's silhouette. And he comes out in the dark, and it was so overwhelming that we were almost in tears. And I, really, truly, almost. It was triumphant for David. He had made it back to living. He had fought off a very bad time in his life. He was back, and everybody knew it. And it was, if anybody was there at that concert that night, they saw a very special night.
If I went to one of your concerts, what would I see in the audience? Is your audience people who first hooked onto you when they were in their teens or early 20s? Or can you reach people who are that age now?
Our audiences are between 14 and 42. And I don't know how it is, but the 14-year-old kids know all the words to the songs. Their mothers, their brothers, their sisters. It does me gives me a great feeling, because it means that the music, which has always been the most important part of us, the infighting, the backstabbing, it means nothing to us. The music is what will last. It will last beyond our fighting, it will last beyond bad reviews from Rolling Stone, it'll last beyond all of it, hopefully. And when 14-year-old kids who were conceived after some of the songs were conceived, sing the words to those songs, it makes me feel great as a musician.
Which of your songs makes you feel best? Maybe you can't narrow it down to any one.
I can narrow it down very much. It's always the one that I'm writing now. It's always the one that is on the edge of coming into creation. When you've written songs, you know, you have to let them go. You record them and you let them go out of your system, and it gives me more room inside for more creation. But the song that I always love is the one I'm writing right now.
The American Dream album.
Yeah, good piece of work.
We'll hold it up so you see it, folks.
You look like David Letterman when you do that.
The inspiration behind it.
Was born very much out of the feeling that we talked about earlier with Crosby coming out of jail. Neil called Crosby one day and said, listen, you know, I'd like to make music with you, but I just can't tolerate the situation. If you ever manage to get straight and free of drugs, I'd like to make another album. And it was a great carrot for David to do. Now, that's not the reason why he straightened up, but it certainly was one of the reasons why American Dream came into being. We went to Neil's ranch, which is in Northern California. We sequestered ourselves away for about 11 weeks and had a wonderful time.
In the video, the American Dream video, you're surprised in bed by an almost assaultive guy with a guitar, and he puts his foot on your chest, and whoa!
That's the first time my kids ever met Neil. They'd heard about him for years, of course, and that was the first time they'd ever met him, and to see him in that punk rocker outfit was insane. I took my kids down to the set, and when my son Jackson saw me in bed with that blonde, he looked over at me and he goes, hey, Dad, you scored.
He's 10?
Yeah. He's a very bright 10.
You run into people routinely now who like your music, but who politically, culturally, in terms of their own lives, are completely on the outside of what you were talking about. I mean, I imagine there are people who listen to your music.
That's an interesting point.
Who listen to your music who voted for Richard Nixon.
I never met any. I really never did. I never met anybody that I know that voted for Nixon.
Or who, let me rephrase it, who would vote for George Bush today, or would have voted for Ronald Reagan?
Well, there's room for everything, you know. Maybe George Bush is going to turn out to be a great president. He's certainly saying some right words, you know, whether it's backed up with correct action, you know, we'll have to wait and
my
see.
point is not to criticize George Bush, only to say that it seems to fall in a different part of the cultural spectrum.
It sure does.
And yet rock and roll now has been homogenized to the point where it spreads out across the culture. I mean, it's nothing to hear people proclaim honestly that no, they love the Beatles, and their fondest notion is to become vice president of their corporation as quickly as they possibly can.
Yeah, it's a strange phenomenon, isn't it? You know, rock and roll has been assimilated into the society in a much deeper level than I ever thought it would. I mean, when you get, you know, Elvis imitators doing the halftime show at the Super Bowl, you know, we've come a long way.
Isn't one of your songs used in an appliance commercial?
Right now, yeah. Sears Kenwood. I try and don't believe that I haven't heard from Neil about this. It's an interesting case, actually. I did sell the rights for them to be able to use Our House as a song.
Mm-hmm.
I did not give them the rights to sound exactly like CSNY, and that's Neil's point. It's a very good point, and I support him very much on this. He feels that they stepped over the bounds of what they were allowed to do by sounding exactly like... He thought it was me that had done the commercial. You know, that's how much it sounded like CSNY. And so it's all going on. He's sitting at home trying to figure out what he's going to do next.
You came out of the Hollies, Crosby out of the Byrds, Stills and Young were in Buffalo Springfield. I mean, already each of you comes to this with pretty good credentials.
Yes.
It's fairly amazing that four personalities that strong and that accomplished already can mesh that way.
Yeah, and it's not surprising that sometimes we don't mesh. You know, after all, it was me that wrote "Wasted on the Way," We have wasted a lot of time in our lives. We have let a lot of music slip underneath the bridge, and it's one regret that I do have.
Wasted on the Way is specifically about that?
Yes, specifically for David and Stephen. And myself, of course. I can't divorce myself from the fact that I'm one of these people.
What's your relationship with Stills and the relationship Stephen has with the other members of the band? There is, and I always hesitate to embrace what you read about somebody. I don't know the man myself, but you read that he can be difficult.
Stephen can be intolerable, but there's a side of Stephen that is totally lovable. The man is a brilliant songwriter and a brilliant musician, and sometimes he has difficulty with his personal life. You know, sometimes he has difficulty seeing reality. Sometimes he gets a little hung up in the image of who Stephen Stills is rather than who the person that Stephen is. The same person that made it impossible to make some of the music was the same person that walked up 38 steps to my house in Los Angeles with a complete lamb dinner when my wife was sick in bed one day, and spread it out before us and left. There are sides of Stephen that are totally lovable, and there are sides of Stephen I can't tolerate.
Wasn't he once quoted as saying, and probably just a careless thing that he said, but he referred to you guys as his backup band?
Stephen, I feel, has always felt that David and I were his backup singers. But that's only what, you know, part of Stephen believes. You know, he's a very complex man. He really is. You should have him on here one day. He's a very complex man.
Stephen, here's the invitation. You can sit in this very same overstuffed chair and say just about anything you want for half an hour. We'll stop and come right back. When I was 18, 19 years old, I wouldn't have dreamed that one of the four would jump right off the album cover someday and be seated across from me. It's an opportunity I can't resist. So we've asked Graham Nash to come back tomorrow night and pick up right where we've left off. The history will continue, and we'll see you later.